Mary, Sorcha, thank you so much for your patience and for coming in to meet us today.
No problem.
It's great to get, we're in Clare, so we want to talk to Clare musicians. Mary, you might start with yourself. You might talk to us where you're from and where you first learned the music.
I come from East Clare, which is about 30 miles from here, 10 miles east of Ennis. I come from a town called Tulla. My mother was an Ennis woman and my father was a Tulla man. So my mother came from a very, very musical background and all of her brothers played. She played music herself. She was a dancer. She's a lovely singer. My father was a great lover of music. So they both encouraged us from a very young age to play music and to listen to music. They both encouraged us in very different ways. My father kind of sent us in the direction of listening to the local musicians, the older musicians in the area, and encouraged us to, he actually recorded a lot of them and encouraged us to learn that music. While my mother, I'd say she probably knew every tune that was out there in her head and she loved to diddle the tunes. So she would diddle the tunes for us and we would learn from her diddling. She was also a step dancer. She'd love to dance while we'd be playing. So that all combined, I think, ensured that we got a great musical start in life.
What were their names?
My mother was Ita McMahon from Ennis and my father was Andy MacNamara from Tulla.
Just for the record, it's great to hear. So you were steeped in it from...
I think so, yeah. Well, it's always felt very natural, music. The love, the passion, I think, is what was important for us. That's what we got from it. And we've carried that away. And I love passing that passion on to people.
Did they, when you were growing up as a young child, was it kind of like an instrument put into your hand? Or did they put it into your hand or did you come onto it yourself?
It kind of happened naturally enough in that we were always in the company of musicians. So it was very natural for musicians to visit the house. It was natural for us to go to sessions. My father kind of went out and bought accordions. He thought that might be the instrument for us all to go towards at the very beginning. And I suppose it was kind of cheap enough to buy accordions at the time. And so we all started out on accordions. And Vincent Griffin was actually teaching. Vincent Griffin, the famous fiddle player, was teaching in Tulla. And we went to classes with Vincent. And there was all the local kids in the town were going. It was all instruments in the same class. So we learned a lot there. But after a while, I kind of went towards the concertina. And my father bought me a concertina again. It was only a 2-row German concertina, which he bought in Limerick for £10. And we were a very happy... group of young musicians because we didn't know an awful lot, but what we did know we had learned from the tradition of what was around us, from the diddling of my mother, from listening to the recordings that my father made and from sitting beside the musicians at the sessions playing the tunes. So we didn't actually learn from books. We didn't know what direction we were going and we just learned and played what we heard.
It's great to learn that way in a social setting.
Absolutely, very natural.
Yeah. So when you were growing up then you started off in that concertina. You might talk to us about...
I still have the concertina at home. It's a 2-row CF German Hohner concertina. So that meant I was playing in C. My brothers had 2 BC accordions. They were only playing 1 row. They were playing the C row. We put a Queally band together. So the whole Queally band had to play in C. But we didn't know we were in C. We were very happy. So we played for years in the key of C. That concertina, as I said, I only played the 1 row. It was difficult to play. But I didn't realise at the time that it was a difficult instrument to play because the cardboard bellows, stiff buttons and all the rest. But I managed it. I probably developed a style on that concertina that has stayed with me to this day because I started on a concertina like that. And it was through Sonny Murray in Ennis and Paddy Murphy in back here in West Clare. They introduced me to Wheatstone and Jeffrey's concertinas, and they were both very kind. They gave me the loan of their instruments now and again to have a go at it, and then I discovered, okay, I can play 2 rows, and we sat down and we worked it out. There were no classes, so just worked it out, and eventually my father bought me a Wheatstone from Paul Davis in England, and that Wheatstone took quite a while to come in. It was bought for £100. And my father took a checkbook out of his pocket and he said, "Here, I'll write you the cheque." And he said, "No, it has to be cash." Of course, my father didn't have £100 in the house, so he had to go out to the publican next door, who made up the remainder of the cash. And that's how the concertina was paid for at the time. I still have it, a beautiful Wheatstone. It's worth 5,000 now.
So your father's investment was well worth it.
Yeah.
And not only the financial investment, what it gave you.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Straight away up to the next level. So up the Queally band automatically went up to D then, because I had a concertina that could play. And
when you started on the new concertina then, was it a game changer for your music? Did it change you? Were you happy about that? Was it? How did that feel?
Excited. My brother, who was very... He'd been doing piano, classical piano, and he could read and write music, and he was very intrigued by the whole thing. So he took the concertina and he studied it, and he worked out what direction I should go in, and this is where we're going to get the scale of D and the scale of G and all that. It was exciting, and then it just fell naturally into. But I don't think I changed the whole pile when I just progressed along with the. It was easier to play, a lot easier to play. There was no doubt about that.
It's a brilliant story.
I love going back to the Honer every now and again. I even love the smell of it, and the feel of it. And it's difficult to play, but it has that most beautiful sound, tone, which is very warm, and it totally takes me back to my childhood.
Yeah. During those times, who were the main players in your locality playing?
Well, the very famous ones were Bill Malley, Joe Ban, Martin Rochford, Peter Hayes, John Naughton, Mikey Donoghue, Sandy Carty, all wonderful musicians, all playing great music, really natural music. Would meet in pubs, meet in houses. It was so natural to meet these people and just play music. And we played with them, and we learned all the music. Our music, we learned it from them. We learned it very naturally, and they were very generous with their music. It was almost like it kind of seeped through to us from them. It was never a lesson. It was never kind of, you do this way or that way.
Never?
It was just, not really, no. It was just very natural with these musicians. Martin Rochford was the only one who took it upon himself to, he took an interest in me because he liked concertina. And he taught me a number of tunes. And he fairly put me through the ropes now, learning these tunes, because he wanted them played the way he had them. And he was very interested in variations and that kind of thing. But Martin used to write out the tunes in notation, and he used to post them through my letterbox. Maybe 2 or 3 days later, okay, you've learned it by ear now. Here it is. These are the notes, and the second time around, this is the way such and such will play. The third time around, that's a local variation. Fourth time around, and they've been really lovely things to have. So he would meet me the next time then, and of course he would say, "Well, Mary, how's it going? Have you got that tune right?" And I would play it for him, and I'd have to get it right. I'd stay with him until I had it right.
It's amazing that something like that, a gesture, would drive someone on as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Well, he didn't even play the concertina. He's
a beautiful fiddle player and piper, but he loved music, and he was interested in, he loved seeing the younger generation coming on and playing. There were not many young people playing when I was playing in Tulla.
How would you describe, and maybe it's too broad of a question, describing the style of the locality? Maybe there were individuals, I don't know, you might talk to me about it.
The East Clare style, it's still there as far as I'm concerned. It's very... I describe East Clare music as lift, rhythm and swing. There's a lift in the melody, there's a lovely swing, and there's a very natural rhythm in the music. I think because there wasn't too much outside influence into East Clare for a long time, that what they had remained, and it passed on to the next generation and the next generation. It has stayed and it has become known and recognised, and there are people now who come from outside who want to learn that style, or certainly like to use some of it in their own music. It's a very free style, I think. It's simple, but at the same time, there's a lot underneath there that is going on it calls in the listener in a special way. Simplicity and beauty.
I like that. sometimes some people, simplicity can be a very hard thing to achieve.
Simplicity is very difficult to achieve, yeah. Sure
But
is.
if you have it naturally, it's...
Yeah, but you have to have that natural element to get the simplicity, and you can't learn that. You just pick it up.
When you're growing up in maybe circle, have it, or to think about this as well, that when you're growing up then and you're getting young, you're meeting other people, and if you move away from East Clare, did you ever cheat on the style, or did you ever find yourself moving away from it? And that's not a bad thing, but or did you ever always want willingly, consciously being rooted to a tradition and play the same way, or was it just?
Yeah, I left Clare in 1978 to go and live in Dublin and work there, and a whole new light bulb came on for me when I went to Dublin. I didn't realise there was so much more out there, to be quite honest with you. The first thing I found was that the tunes I was playing, playing a lot of C, D minor, G minor, that, and I realised, oh God, I have a lot to learn here. I said, I'm back to scratch. And I was living with my brother at the time, and he, as I said, he was very musical, and he said, into town there, get O'Neill's 1001. And we bought it inside in McCullough, and we came back out and we sat in the flat and I started learning tunes out of O'Neill's 1001.
That's entirely different to what you were brought up with.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I was going to the sessions, I felt I had to know the tunes. The first night I sat into a session in Dublin, I was shocked. I took my concertina out, I didn't play one note because I didn't know any of the tunes, and I went home and I was horrified, and I said, God almighty, what am I doing here?
When I look at that now, I say it's a good thing. I see it as an authenticity to it.
Was I tempted to change my style? Initially, I didn't know enough to want to change a style. I just wanted to be able to join in and be part of the session. I think people always identified that I was a little bit different in style, and I'd often be at sessions and people would say, Mary Mac, give us a tune there from Tulla, from East Clare. And they could see that was that little bit different. As I went on, probably 10 years, 20 years on from that, I dabbled in trying out different things and, the technique and all that kind of thing. I can do it. I've learned how to do it. It's never become part of my music. I've always been drawn back to what I've learned from the very early stages. There's a lot of things I do in the concertina now that I wouldn't have done 30 years ago because I'm playing a better instrument. Obviously I'm getting a different reaction from the instrument. I can do better things, throwing in a few rolls and things like that. But simplicity, the root of what I learned is still there, and it's what I'm always, even though sometimes I might have tried to move away from it, thinking that maybe I should really move away from it, I've just been naturally drawn back. And now I've just said to myself, that's it, I'm staying here. I'm not going to change anything, I'll just do what I'm doing.
You're at peace?
Yeah,
no need
completely at peace now, yeah.
And so you moved to Dublin?
Yeah, that was in 1978, and I was there for 18 years. A fantastic time, and I knew so many musicians there and made so many friends, learned a lot when I was there. And John Naughton, who was from Clare and a concertina player whom I'd learned a lot from, actually moved to Dublin in 1968 with his family. And he was a two-row player, or a single-row player as well, and he and I used to meet a lot, and he was very, very popular in Dublin with all the other musicians. So he was a big support to me. But the whole Dublin scene, I just loved it. It was absolutely, and I played with so many different musicians, and of course my style went with whoever I was with, but again, came back to my own when I was on my own.
That's great. What places in Dublin were you playing in?
Okay, have you ever, the Four Seasons at the top of Cable Street was a big place. John McAfee and John Kelly and them used to be there on a Thursday night. Upstairs, were you ever in it?
No.
Okay, you're too
I've
young.
always heard about it lots.
So when you go up the stairs in the Four Seasons on a Thursday night, it was a very special night, a great, great session, and only the best of musicians there. But greeting you inside the door was Andy Conroy and old John Kelly. They greeted everybody. They said, the door's here, and you walked in, and they're very like this place here, actually. And they interviewed everybody as they came in. And you have to sit down. Yeah, where are you this week? Where did you play? How's it going? And it was just lovely. Mrs. Kelly used to be there as well. And then you went up and you joined the session. And the group, I think they were called Kelp at the time, John McAfee, John Kelly, Catherine McAvoy, Jacinta McCormick was on piano. There was a little platform, a stage, you know, it's probably about 3 or 4 inches high. They sat on that. Other musicians sat around. And it was a very welcoming session, but, you know, top quality music. And we used to go in there every Thursday night. And at about 11:20, we'd dash out, we'd run up Cable Street and up, what's the name of that street? I've forgotten now. To get the Dorset Street, to get the 12, but the last number 12 bus back to Ranelagh to get home, because that was our only hope of getting home on time, because you'd be walking otherwise. Wonderful memories of the Four Seasons. Clondanagh, the Harcourt Hotel. Slattery's on occasions, not too often. Hughes's, of course, came then in the 80s, and I was there at that time. They were fantastic nights in Hughes's. The Manivarn. These are all gone, all these places, you wouldn't.
I know all the names.
Yeah, you know all the names, yeah. Yeah. Harcourt Hotel at 3 a.m.
Nice.
Sounds
all
this music, yeah. Oh, great, fantastic.
Sounds great. Commercial recordings, did you go on to make many?
I've made a few. In 1994, I made my first commercial recording, traditional music from East Clare, and it was a fabulous experience. It was made by Clondanagh, and P.J. Hayes and Martin Hayes recorded on that CD with me, and it was voted Album of the Year by the Irish Times that year. So, and that was a huge lift for me, absolutely amazing. Then I went on to make The Blackberry Blossom, which was another solo album, and my brother Andrew did 1 or 2 tracks with me on that. Then I made Note for Note. It totally solo, raw, nothing on it, only myself. And Padre O'Reilly did that with me. And then I made The Lady's Cup of Tea with Sorcha, a duet album. I also made another album with my brother Andrew called Open Heart. And that album was about all the tunes of East Clare that we learned as children. That's what that tune was about. Or that album, sorry.
So you've done plenty. It's not an easy thing to do. Like there's a lot of people sitting on couches talking but not recording, so it's a testament.
Well, I've just finished a book. I've put all the recordings together, transcribed them, and put them into a book, and it's in print at the moment.
Oh, brilliant.
It'll be out in August, yeah. And it's called Sundays at Lena's. It's the pub where we used to play on a Sunday morning with all these musicians. So all those tunes are transcribed in the book, and just my memories of these musicians.
You were playing, and you've mentioned a lot of names there, P.J. Hayes, obviously, Rochford. Were there any women playing when you were growing up? Yeah,
that was a great question. Mrs. Donnellan, who was extremely old, she never came out. She played concertina, but she would have been very famous, and we would know about her. My father would have brought me to hear her from time to time. She's really the only one that I can remember.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
So you were the only one?
Yeah. Well, my sister played, and there was a few of the local kids at home who played, but no.
And how did you feel growing up in that? Was it okay?
I was fine, yeah. But you know about the older musicians being female now, or the...
anything like...
Yeah. No, in the younger generation, there was, the females were certainly creeping in there. But all the older musicians that I knew, that I learned from, they were all male. Yeah. No, I've no memory of a female musician. Wow. Ran Aunt Minnie Murphy in Kilmaley on my mother's side. That would have been the only female influence that I would have had.
Oh, that's great to see that we're definitely more diverse. So then Sorcha came along.
Yeah, Sorcha was born in 1995, were you? 95, yeah. And she's always been very musical. My mother used to say she's been around before.
Do you feel that yourself, Sorcha?
Maybe, yeah. Well, I think, I don't know if I was around before, but sometimes, the tunes that Mum would have taught me when I was younger, I definitely felt like I knew them already. Probably because I was listening to so much music in the house growing up, and I'm being brought to festivals like Willie Clancy from being a baby, and I think that really living in that environment, and even when you're not maybe aware of how much music is going in, it is going in. It's almost like osmosis. You're really retaining an awful lot, and then once the instrument is in your hand, it's very easy to get that out.
Did you ever rebel?
As not against music in general, but maybe as a teenager, I probably liked to get a little bit adventurous, and sort of didn't really like traditional, like very, very traditional East Clare style. I wanted a little bit more, life. But really, at the end of it all, I knew that was my grounding in music. But it didn't last long.
You had a reckoning, and you seen the light.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever feel pressure to play? As in, I don't mean that in a bad way, but because obviously you come from such a musical family, and that can be, some people find that difficult growing up, and then others, obviously it's a natural thing to happen.
No, I never felt pressured to play. It was like Mom was saying, her own upbringing, it was very much the same for me. It was never forced on me. It just happened. As I got older, other things like sports did come in the way a little bit, but I always came back to the music. So no, I couldn't say that I was ever pressured, and I think that makes it so much more enjoyable. If you're doing it for the love of it, I see sometimes children being pressured nowadays, and they give it up because it can be difficult.
So we're a Scoil with Willie Clancy, right? And there's loads of different players, and it's really intense at times, and there's so many different styles, but at the same time there could be a session of 20 people playing music. And what are your thoughts on that in terms of when you're playing? Do you seek out certain musicians, or do you seek out to play with certain styles, or?
I wouldn't say that I seek out to play with certain styles, but I suppose within my friend group and the people that I would listen to alone, I think everybody compromises. Nobody is going in there as a solo musician. When we meet, we all put all our different styles from all over the country in the middle, and we meet in the middle, and I think that's important. I don't go in there and play only East Clare tunes, so it's really lovely to see that musicality where people can compromise to come together, and something really special happens there, I think, where everybody is, playing new tunes or learning new tunes, so that we all have something in common in the middle.
I love that moment when sometimes you might have a drink on as well, and it's great, and you're in that free flow state.
It is.
And that you can see it actually happening, You might play a tune. Would you be interested in playing a tune?
Yeah,
why not?
We will.
Yeah.
Will we play tunes from East Clare?
Do whatever you want. Or if you want to dabble in that other stuff. I love that. Dabbling in...
Okay.
Lovely. I've never heard that. No.
Yeah.
No, that version I've never.
Well, that's
heard
what this book I'm doing is about those versions of these tunes. Yeah.
What I'm intrigued about this book is what's brilliant is that it's actually a representation of what you said. That it was previously it was all this natural, but that you're also able at the same time to put it on record.
Yeah. And I've
how do you
also
find that process? Is that challenging you? Of putting it down onto a piece of paper. The music is obviously fluid and dynamic, and sometimes we don't know what the hell it is, but putting it onto a book.
I've been a very long time working on the project in my head. You know, and when I actually got at it, it flowed. But just getting the whole thing, the structure of it right, and that I really enjoyed doing it. These are recordings my father made back 50 years ago. Some of them 60 years ago, and now some of the recordings are very poor quality, and trying to get the melody out of it was a lot of difficulty at times in that. The only thing that was good about it is I knew all the music. I was so familiar with it. I've also put a CD with the book, so I've picked the best tracks from these, a sample from all of the 6 musicians who I've covered. So there's a CD accompanying the book. It's not great, but it gives you an idea of the flair and the quality of the music that they played.
Did he record himself? Did he have the equipment, or did someone
He just
else?
had a Bosch TP66 tape recorder. That's all he had.
Does he leave you any messages in it? Or is
No. Well, like in Laughter, I was there for a lot of the. You can hear some lovely conversations in the background, and people say, "I'm good man," and it's lovely. There's some gorgeous stuff there. Really, really, it's nice to have it. I've always wanted to do something with it. It'll be a big interest among a very small group of people, but it'd be nice to have it there, and I'm looking forward to putting it into the archive.
Oh, we're looking forward to getting something
that's
like
where that's where I want it to be, so that
it.
maybe in 50 years' time or 60 years' time, another group will sit here and maybe discuss that music and see what has happened to it since.
It's a chilling feeling when you think about it that literally in 50 years' time, someone will want to look at that.
Well, yeah, and I can't. It's 50 years ago that I'm talking about. I can't believe that time has gone, and these music got it again. The musicians got it from another. It's going back 200 years. Some of this music.
So you're saying that there isn't, like, obviously Sorcha's playing great stuff now, getting great recognition for that, which is amazing. Do you see that style in Sorcha if you were to sit here in front of her? Maybe it's not as easy to say it.
No, Sorcha knows exactly how I feel. There's a huge amount of passion in Sorcha's music. She has all that rawness in there. She has massive musicality ability, and she can go in any direction she likes. But I do know that she's like me. She's drawn back to the old style anytime she wants to, and she comes and goes from it. And I think it's great to be able to do that. But some of these tunes like that we've played, they're being lost. These tunes, these versions of tunes are,
That version of Pigeon the Gatehouse.
Isn't it gorgeous? Yeah.
Sorcha, you, like, what I find into the Gaul music as well, sometimes I find it coming to places like here, and you're travelling from East Clare to West Clare.
Yeah.
Obviously there's other people from all over Ireland and the world. Are there people recording these tunes from you? Like, do you play these tunes out much? Because it is a gem what you have, don't underestimate.
Yeah, well I definitely recognise that it is a gem. I suppose the situations that I do play them is usually when I'm playing with Mum and that, and I think people definitely do recognise them. They probably do take out the tape recorders, I would imagine, but I wouldn't in general play them unless someone requested it, or sometimes I find myself falling into that version of a tune, because they're so unique, these versions of the tunes. It's unbelievable. They're actually sometimes not recognisable, and it can be sometimes hard to learn different versions of the same tune. So I find myself falling into that. If we were playing the Pigeon on the Gate, for example, in the session with my friends, I might get mixed up between the two of them. But in general, I've really enjoyed learning these versions of the tunes, because I've always heard them, but to get the actual definite detail of exactly what's going on there has been really enjoyable. And my God, they're so beautiful. And I listen back to those recordings, the musicians are exquisite. They're playing terrible instruments, but yet it's still so beautiful. It is. It really is.
you're playing a foreign music. I'm joking. In West Clare, you're coming up because the music is different here. It seems.
It is, yeah.
But it's great to see that.
Yeah, it is different.
Difference is a great thing.
Absolutely, it's so important. We can't all be the same.
No, we can't.
Very boring.
I'm sorry. I know I don't want to keep you. Is it a conscious? Do you think about your music consciously, or is it? Do you ever step back and think about what you're doing? I know that's a weird question.
I just know that when I think about my music, I think about something that I love, and I'm very passionate about it, and I really enjoy it, and I love sharing it with people, and I love discussing it. So when I think about music, I think that's my therapy. That's my time in life where I just feel I'm 100% comfortable, happy. So.
It's lovely, yeah. And
I've heard you speaking, Mary, before about listening, about the kind of importance of listening, and how maybe these days it's the quality of listening is maybe on the decline. I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that.
And do be honest.
It's my hobby horse.
I probably share your
Yeah, I have a fierce difficulty with people's poor ability to listen. We learned how to listen. It was the one thing we were told when we went to a session. My father would say, going in the door, you listen. You don't play until you're asked to play, but listen to what's happening and bring it home. And if you don't listen to it, you can't bring it home. But I see, and I am in so many situations, and in teaching situations, and you have to say the same thing 45 times. And people say, on the 30th time, oh, really? Is that right? They're just not listening. They're not listening to the tune. They're not listening to what you're saying. And I think it's a pity because there's a lot lost there.
What do you think of workshops and formal lessons and big, especially even here, there's big outdoor, I suppose we have to be careful too, but because you didn't come from that environment, you learned by osmosis. So
I completely,
what's the impact, I wonder, of a workshop? Now, everyone's going to workshops and it's like, learn tunes,
it depends on the person's approach to the workshop. I actually teach a lot of workshops. It's something that has developed with me over the last 20 years or more, and I have I think I probably have a different technique in the workshop teaching. I try to engage with my students all the time. I try to draw them in. I certainly work on getting them to listen, but I tell them the story of the music as well as teaching the music and talk about the instrument. I certainly talk about the background of the tunes, whether it is something that was newly composed yesterday or it's coming from 200 years ago. I try to educate them and teach them how to enjoy what they're learning rather than focusing on just listening to themselves all the time and not listening to anybody else.
Did Queally bands, does that come into your sphere?
Very
because much. Does the East Clare style, or were they a big part of it?
Well, the Tulla band, I played a bit with the Tulla band on and off, and they would have been a very big part of my life growing up. And it's just the Tulla band. They have a style of music that is recognised around the world, and it'll never change. And that's the lovely thing about that. We had a Queally band when we were kids, very much based on what the Tulla band was. Sorcha then, newer generation, she works a lot with Queally bands, training Queally bands for the Fleadh. So you'd have a lot to say about that, Sorcha.
Well, yeah, I do. And I mean, I've really enjoyed, in general, I'm not a huge fan of competition and sometimes the pressures that it can put on people, and, it's sometimes not great. However, I've really enjoyed taking on board some young musicians and really trying to achieve that, not necessarily a Tulla band sound, but a good music sound that maybe comes away from the formula that the Fleadh has put in place.
Okay, so there is a formula.
Oh, there is, yeah.
Where I come, this is all oblivious to me, so I'm intrigued by this.
Yeah, there is a formula, and it's sort of hard, strong, as loud as you can play sort of music, and sometimes it can be quite slow, and it's not really dance music in my opinion. So what I'm really trying to do is to teach these young people to play dance music, and yes, there's a certain amount, obviously you want them to be playing the same thing and, having a certain amount of structure in it. It's necessary for it to come across well, but to make sure that the music that they're playing is good music and it's dance music and it's traditional. That's, you know.
It is dance music.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It has to beat and it has to bop.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then if you are solo musicians and you've done a lot of solo albums, then how do you reconcile that? Do you go back? Does it impact your music then as a solo performer?
Kelly
Yeah,
bands.
yeah.
For having no.
Is there any influence?
I think that they're two very separate things, and it's actually something I say to my students when they come in the door for Queally band practices. Leave your solo out of this. I'm going to tell you to do everything wrong here now, you know. So I think that once you can separate them, and sometimes I would have the fiddle players that are in the band as a solo, and I have to maybe calm them down a bit after the practice.
Stop those very.
Yeah.
Leave that to your.
You know, they might be playing a bit louder or faster, but no, I think it's definitely quite separate, and you should be able to separate them.
Final question, because thank you so much for your time, and we
No
might
problem.
final question, and we would love to get one final tune off you. If you were to go back and tell your younger self something, this is for both of you after years of dabbling and all that sort of stuff. If you were to go back and say one piece of advice, either for your younger self or for younger people playing the music that we love, maybe some people don't love, what do you say to them?
Gee, if I was saying to a younger person, kind of don't do what I did, or yeah.
Just anything.
Well, all I can say is for myself, I am so happy and so complete with my music life. I don't have any regrets in any area of my musical life. And I try to tell young people, please go for it and enjoy it and love what you're doing. Because if you don't love it, if you're doing it because somebody's forcing you to do it, you're not going to continue. I just try and say, love it, enjoy it, and love the people you meet, because everybody you meet in music, they're all such good people. It's a great life to be in, and it's a ticket to freedom.
Yeah. I like that, yeah. What do you think, Sorcha?
I think I certainly don't have any regrets myself either.
I'm not asking about
I know,
regrets. Or
I know.
learnings or just things.
Oh, I know, yeah, but when I think about, me as a child, I'm not sure at the time I valued the people I was surrounded by and the, wealth of culture and that I was surrounded by, and I just sometimes wish that I listened more intently or appreciated it more, or wasn't looking, can I get out of here? As a young child it's very difficult, of course, to do that, but if I could just advise young people to really appreciate the older musicians who are around you, who have a lot of experience and are passing on that music, and to listen and to make sure you take it on board, even if it's not what you like yourself, to listen.
Jeez, yeah, I've learned loads out of this. Sorry, it's all to your pain and to my gain, but I'd love to hear a final set.
All right, okay, yeah.